I want to call this meeting to order, please, the resource meeting. And everybody stand for a prayer, please. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing this group together today. Thank you, Lord, for this beautiful day we're having. And Lord, just I pray that you give us some wisdom, knowledge, and understanding about our job that we're here to do today. Be with us and go through this day, Lord. And we thank you. Amen.
Amen.
You see, please. Roll call.
Curtis Snell,
Here.
Chris Stokes,
Here.
Bill England,
Here.
Bill John Baker,
Here.
Jack Baker,
Here.
Harley Buzzard,
Here.
Julia Coates, Bradley Cobb, Joe Crittenden, Jody Fishinghawk, Meredith Fraley, Janelle Fulbright, Don Garvin, Chuck Hoskin Jr., Tina Glory Jordan, David Thornton, Kara Cowan Watts. We do have one.
Have a quorum. Thank you. First item of business we'll discuss discussion regarding the rural transit program. And Councilman Buzzard, would you
Thank you.
this, please?
The reason I requested this meeting, we've had the road department on the program for the other resources meeting, and we just didn't have enough time to really discuss transit, and this is the reason I want to call it a special meeting. It's not a meeting that I see us maybe getting a resolution out here today, or maybe we do want to get a resolution out, but I think we're getting to the point of where we need to look at transit a little more than what we have in the last couple of years. I'm not saying it needs to go in the roads department or anyplace else. I think that's up for the administration to make those calls. But I think with gasoline getting over $3 a gallon now, I think we need to start looking at it sooner than later. I know that coming over from the road program several months ago, we had actually done a study, and that's the reason I wanted to ask Michael Land to come over and kind of give us a breakdown on what they found out and what the outcomes were of the surveys, and maybe where some funding could come from, and let the council people kind of take a look at this. You know, with people traveling from different areas of the 14 counties, it would certainly help people to come to the nation here for services, or even to the Hastings Hospital, workers in general. And I'm not just limiting this to the Cherokee Nation, but I'm looking at the C&E, Cherokee Nation Enterprises, over at Catoosa. We have a lot of people that live in the Farrar area that could actually go to Will Rogers Dam. The guy could go into the Catoosa shop. So you're looking at a savings for people that work for us, and especially, you know, our Indian people. Now, I understand if it's a transit program that you can't just designate it as for Cherokee Nation. It has to be open to the public, which if you get public dollars, that's the way it goes. The other thing is through Federal Highway, I know there's some grants out there, and I know Michael and the road program, they just don't have time to pursue those grants, so we may want to look at a different option here within the nation to put the program under if we decide to do that. But I just think it's a time to start looking at transit, those ideas, and see what's out there right now. I know that surveys have been done, and I'm sure Michael will probably elaborate on that stuff. And anyway, it's just a meeting that I wanted to call to make the other council members aware of what's out there and what we're going to be facing in the next, well, we're facing it now, actually. To be honest about it, the gasoline is $3 now, and I suspect that at this time next year we're probably looking at $3.50 to $4 a gallon. And that's the reason I wanted to have a meeting here, Mr. Chairman. So if you would, I'll turn it over to the other people.
Okay, thank you. Billy Hicks, would you like to...
That's my plan.
I'll go in.
I've been called worse.
Good Carter Harley.
That'd be bad.
I appreciate y'all having us back over here. I know this is something that's been a topic of discussion by several people. I know I've been asked a lot of questions about it. Like Harley mentioned, with the cost of oil and gas and just fuel in general increasing over the past several months, alternative transportation needs are definitely a need across the United States, especially here in Oklahoma and rural counties and counties in poverty, near poverty level, sometimes have a hard time. Folks have a hard time getting back and forth to employment. I'm just going to give you a real brief overview of what's taken place so far in our studies and in our grant applications, what we're trying to do to further that study, seek more dollars, things like that, and then I'll just open it up to you all to ask any questions that you have. The existing transportation bill that was passed by Congress and President you've probably heard us refer to it as Safety Lou. That bill actually created a tribal set-aside for transit programs, rural transit programs. There's an existing rural transit program that's always been in effect it's been in effect now for a while, called 5311 or Section 5311. But now a subpart of that is a tribal set-aside that allow tribes to apply for transit dollars. The authorization levels in this new bill are $8 million for fiscal year 2006, and it increases each year to $10 million in 2007, $12 million in 2008, and $15 million in 2009, which is when the existing transportation bill expires. We have done a preliminary study that we use to apply for the federal transit dollars. I'm going to just give you some information out of our study. Some of the research that was done, we found that rural residents spend sometimes 2 and 3 times as much money to get to and from employment as do urban residents. So that is due to extreme travel times that they've got, distances that they have to drive to get to their economic centers or their employment, whatever they're needing to do or go. That's why it's taking them or costing them more, because of distance and time. Of course, the rising fuel costs and the lack of rural transit systems is creating a burden on them by having to pay these prices. There are 3 existing service providers within the nation's boundaries right now. That is, they are Muskogee County Transit, Helavan Transit, and Kaiboy's Area Transit System. That's also called CATS. You've probably seen those buses. They're very prevalent around this area, Tahlequah area. Each of these 3 offer both a fixed route and an on-demand service. They are operated through what I mentioned previously, the Section 5311 programs through the state, and it's administered by the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. Of those 3 providers, CATS, Kaiboy Area Transit System, offers the widest coverage, the most coverage in the 14-county jurisdiction. They average around 191,000 trips per year. That's both for Indian and non-Indian participants. They cover Adair, Cherokee, Sequoia, and a portion of McIntosh County. That's just what the counties they cover within our nation's boundaries. We also worked with the health department of the tribe. Found out that they do a lot of transports of patients back and forth to clinics and hospitals. They transport folks from 8 different clinics and also the 2 hospitals that we offer. Their trips average about 280,000 miles per year at a cost of approximately $200,000 a year. So that was another thing we found out in our study. Based on our plan or our study, we made an application to the FTA, Federal Transit Administration, in 2006 funding for planning costs, replacement costs for the healthcare transports that I just mentioned, as well as a new startup cost for job access and reverse commute. For those of you that are familiar with transit, that sometimes is referred to as JARC, J-A-R-C. We looked at routes from Tahlequah to Stillwell, Tahlequah to Little Kansas, Tahlequah to Salina, Tahlequah to Muskogee, and Tahlequah to Sallisaw, and those will be both back and forth to bring employees to the tribe or to the complex area each day from those areas. I'll go through those again. That's Stillwell, Little Kansas, Salina, Muskogee, and Salisaw. That's part of the job access and reverse commute that I was referring to. We also, as Harley mentioned earlier, looked at C&E in Catoosa. That is, as you know, another very large employment base that we have, and we looked at a route from Pryor area to Catoosa each day. We put out surveys both at C&E, worked with their staff at C&E to put out surveys to their staff, and we also put out a survey here at the tribe on our computer system, allowed the staff to go out there and click on a button, tell us a little bit about where they're coming from, zip code wise, and provide any comments. That study is actually still open today, and I still occasionally get responses. But when that study was first opened, this response was overwhelming. The comments were overwhelming, and we've kept all of those comments. People actually want to have access to something like this, or to have access to a means of transportation other than their own, and they're willing to pay for it. One of the questions we asked was, would they be willing to pay for it? We didn't ask them any pricings, how much would they be willing to pay. We didn't ask them anything like that, but they are willing to pay for it, because they're already paying for gas now. But the response was overwhelming. We did submit a application to the FTA. We were awarded $25,000 for planning in April of 2007. We are working with FTA right now to finalize the award. They're new as well as us. We're new working with them, and they're new working with tribes. So we're all trying to figure out each other's processes. I'm actually was started yesterday, and it ends today. It's an online web seminar on their electronic award management system that is going to be going on this afternoon. It was yesterday afternoon, and it begins again this afternoon. So we're trying to get them the information they need to go ahead and finalize the award for us. We have not received any of the funds yet in hand, but again, we are working on that. What we will do with these funds, we will develop the planning funds that we did receive from FTA. We'll develop a full-blown transit plan. In doing that, we will coordinate with other transit agencies, like I mentioned, CATS and Pelivan, Muskogee Area Transit, and work with them to make Cherokee's citizens aware of the areas that they cover and the services that they provide. My personal feeling is I don't think people realize what is available to them out there right now. I mean, even with or without this type of grant, I don't think they realize the areas that CATS, for instance, covers. And we need to educate folks on that, and whether that be through advertisement, through handouts, flyers, I don't know, but we need to work with these agencies, and that's one thing we will do with in our plan. We'll identify gaps in existing services in our plan to FTA, and we'll also analyze the cost effectiveness and the benefits of the tribe operating a transit program versus contracting that out with area providers. Does it make sense for the tribe to reinvent the wheel when there are other providers out there that are offering the same service? Could we work with them to handle these routes that we're looking for? That's a question that needs to be answered and needs to be studied and looked into. We have been in contact with an organization called CTAA, that's Community Transportation Association of America. That is an organization, it's a membership-based organization. It's based out of Washington, D.C. They provide technical assistance to tribes and other entities who work with FTA, transit providers that work with FTA. So we've been in contact with them. He is scheduled to come down here within probably the next month. I talked with him the other day when I was at a meeting in Denver, and he got my number and I've got his, and we're going to get together and try to get him down here to give us some technical assistance. Here In the tribe, we have a monthly meeting that we attend called the Community Planning and Infrastructure Group. We discuss transit in there quite often to see where it fits in other areas of the tribe, also how it fits into the tribe's strategy, the jobs, language, and community strategies that we have. We've also been working with state transit programs with ODOT. ODOT has been holding statewide planning meetings for their transit program. We've been attending those meetings. One thing I want to point out is any state funding that is applied for does require a match. And I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but this set aside out of the from the new transportation bill for the tribal transit program does not require a match. And when we first applied for this grant, we made that very clear when the resolution was passed. So I have mentioned that to this body before, but I want to mention it again. It does not require a match. But any further funds that if we were to apply for through the state, would require a match. Our assessment from our plan, we need additional data. We needed to do some additional surveys to try to identify the gaps that I mentioned in our final study in the developing the long range plan. The existing services from our preliminary study appear to provide reasonable coverage in the areas of the nation. However, they don't necessarily provide coverage in all the rural areas that we have citizens reside. And another item that we found in our assessment, that some of the transit fares that these companies or organizations charge can sometimes be burdensome. They're similar to probably a taxi cab. If you've ridden in a taxi cab, it's a per mile fare, and that would be something we would need to look into as far as getting some of those costs down if it was chosen to go ahead and work with these agencies, try to subsidize those costs to get them down as minimal as possible for folks. That's really about all I have to report on what's happened and what's taken place so far with the transit grant. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I brought Robert Endicott with me today back here. I think some of you met Robert before in previous meetings. He had a big part in this application and the study, as well as Mr. Buzzard when he was over in the department. Any of us can answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Michael?
Michael, on CTTA, you said there's a cost to join the organization. Is there a cost for him to come down and do the study?
No, there is not. I may not have made that very clear. When I talked with him, I asked him, because that's one thing I wanted to know, is there a cost for his service? And he said there is not. I said, well, how does your organization work? And he explained to me that it is a membership-based organization. They do not charge for the technical assistance that they provide. I'm sure in the end they would want or expect you to become a member of the organization. And from all indications, it sounds like an organization that would be beneficial to be a member of. But it does not cost him to come down here. I did ask him that specifically. While I'm still mentioning, I meant to pass these out right off the bat. These are some maps that we have that we generated during our study. They may be a little overwhelming to look at. There's a lot of lines and a lot of numbers on some of them. If you can flip to the second page, second and third, but let's talk about the second one real quick. Those are, if you see the numbers there, those are those are employees that travel from each of these areas to Tahlequah each day. This information or data was taken out of our payroll system based on their home address in our accounting payroll system. So this was not derived from the survey, but it was derived from data that we had existing. Some of the numbers are kind of hard to read. A better picture is probably on page 3 there, the last one in your packet. These hone in on the higher numbers coming into Tahlequah each day. You can see from Stillwell there's 184 employees that apparently drive from Stillwell each day, 103 from Vian, 122 from Muskogee, and on around. So we actually honed in on the higher populations, and that's the list that I read earlier as far as the studies where we honed in on our preliminary study on the routes to Tahlequah each day were derived from this type of study that we did. So I want to go ahead and leave you with those maps.
Are there any more questions for Michael?
Just want to make a comment. I know Michael has put a lot of work into this, and it looks to me like it would be a good idea to have CTTA to come down and actually study this program out, even if you had to pay a membership to it, to see what we have existing. You just mentioned a while ago about the cats. There may be a cats bus in Stillwell already that could pick those people up. So we may not even need a route there. So I think it's a good idea to go forward with studying this, just to see what we have available now. And we know that's put a lot of money in. And what you said a while ago about notifying the public what's out there, that's probably what we're lacking right now. Otherwise, people may be riding the CATS bus already, but they just knew. So I think a lot of it is just PR work that maybe could get done with after the study is done. So I think you're on the right track, Michael.
Chris, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had two questions. One focuses for the employees that work at these various locations, but then there's another option that's available for just the general citizenry that's out in the communities. And that's one thing that I know, like in our area, we have Pelivan, and they can come and either for a fee or whatever, they can take you to that. And they've recently started where they're advertising among the industrial areas to say, look, we've got for $2.75 you can come and meet at these locations, and we'll take you back and forth, which is pretty cheap. But to come from prior to Tahlequah, there's some service boundaries that you cross, and just what kind of denotes this. So what is your feeling for your main target? Apparently most of your study has been on employees, right?
It has, yes.
Versus the citizens wanting to go from Nowata to Tahlequah for various reasons. The impact of that would be, initially when you look at it, do you see these three existing groups maybe working together at some substation, or with pickup points where you drop that off, or is it more that you would have an all-inclusive coverage area for one outfit? Let's say the cats would they be able to expand, or is there any restrictions on why they only service so many counties? Have you come across any of that discussion?
If you don't mind, Mr. Soap, I'm going to ask Rob to address that. I know he's worked with CATS quite a bit, as well as Pelivan. He's had some discussions with Pelivan.
Okay.
And he knows more about the boundaries and their service jurisdictions than I do, and I'm going to let him
I'm just
address
curious
that.
on the requirements on that.
Sure.
Is it kind of a friendly relationship, or there are certain boundaries that, because we've subsidized or we've funded this coverage area, you have to stay within your agreed boundaries? What's the status of that?
Well, first of all, and this is the first time I've met you. Are you Charlie's son?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really fond of your dad.
Yeah, good.
And it's nice to meet you. And again, I'm Rob Endicott, and I work real close with Michael on a lot of planning issues. The issues with the different transit organizations, some of that has to do with their ability to provide coverage, and then some of it has to do with their ability to get funding, and then another aspect of it is that they do work together on trade-offs. Trade-off is not a good word. The handoff is a better word.
Right.
In terms of shuttling folks to a certain point, and then once they reach a point, and then the other transit agency takes them to their final destination. So there is interagency coordination more than you think, and we found that out as a result of attending, the state planning, because the state kind of is encouraging this, and before too long they're going to require it in all of their transit programs that they fund. And so, but getting back to the original point that you brought up, without having all of the studies done and all the data and information collected to develop a full-blown transit plan, what we did in this preliminary study was ask ourselves a couple of questions. One, what do we know? Well, and in saying that, how does that comply with the three strategic priorities of the tribe in terms of jobs, community, and language and culture? And we knew that we could address, at least in a preliminary study here, the jobs strategy and partly the community strategy too, because we knew that the Cherokee Nation itself is the largest employer in this region. Okay, you mentioned some routes up in Mays County up with Pelivan, and I know that they have some workforce routes transporting folks over to the Mid-America Industrial District. And so there are other avenues to look at, but essentially, and what Michael has told you is what we know thus far, and what we found thus far is that, based on the Cherokee Nation being the largest employer in this region, we've identified, at least on a preliminary basis, a huge need. But there are other things that we want to look at. We know that, for instance, folks may be traveling to Stillwell to work somewhere else, or they may be traveling to Hastings, and so there's all kinds of work-related, healthcare, and other types of transit-related issues that we need to look at. Right now, the data and information is just so preliminary that we just don't know everything that we need to do to complete a transit plan yet. But that's our goal. So
But this data is just based upon employment.
Absolutely, and that's just one aspect of transit needs that have been identified out there thus far. So.
Anybody have more questions for Michael or Robert?
Just a comment, I think the purpose for me asking for this special meeting is to let the other council members know what's out there, that there's some money that could be gotten from the Federal Highway Administration for this, and just to make sure that we know that, it's not a transit system is never going to make any money. You don't make any money doing transit. But if you'll stop and look, people used to go to OSU, they travel a lot from OSU, from Stillwater to Tulsa. And now they have a regional transit bus that goes from the campus of Stillwater to Tulsa. They make probably 4 to 6 trips a day every day, and it's grown. It's taken it 8 to 10 years to grow, but this is something that, we can't jump into it big time when we start, but, we can certainly make it grow over a period of years. And I think mainly what I wanted us to do is to let them come over and explain what they've done and what's out there that we make them get, and ask this body for support, if they come to that we need some type of dollars to match, or to give them the support to go ahead and continue their studies. And I think that was the purpose for me to call this meeting. So I don't think, and correct me someone if I'm wrong or right, but I don't think we need a resolution for it. I think we just need a letter of support or a matter of record for support for this study. So I'll make that in the form of a motion to make a
Second.
Here's a motion and a second. I have any discussion on that? All voting yes?
Aye.
No, same sign? Carries. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, guys, and I appreciate you having us back over here. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know.
Anybody have any announcements? Our next meeting will be December the 10th, 4 o'clock. I hear adjourned. Second. Adjourned.